Good morning, members of the media and our external audience. My apologies for the delayed start. As usual, technology has failed us, but we will proceed manually. I'm told you'll be able to see the panel of speakers next to me. Firstly, my name is Adrian McKay from Corporate Affairs at the PIC. Welcome to this media briefing. We are presenting the annual report for the financial year 2023-24. I'll introduce the panel. Closest to me, the CEO, Mr. Abel Sithole. Next to him, the Chief Investment Officer, Mr. Kabelo Rikhotso. And then the Head of Finance, the man with the money, is Mr. Mavuka. We'll proceed while we try to resolve the technology. Especially welcome to the journalists physically present with us. And we will try to get the video feeds and the presentation up to you as soon as possible. So I'd like to hand over now to the CEO, Mr. Abel Sithole, to address you. Thank you very much.
Good morning and welcome to those that are joining us physically at PIC. Welcome to the PIC. I know some of you have been here before, so it's good to see you. I know that COVID is probably a year or so behind us, but it's been a very strange environment where we have not been able to engage with each other personally. So to see some of the old familiar faces again in person, I think it really is a gratifying experience to see you all again. The PIC, the board of the PIC management and the staff of the PIC again welcomes you to this briefing. The reason why I think I'm hesitating is it's not really a briefing because, strictly speaking, it is an opportunity where you can almost publicly hold us to account. Quite often, myself, I'll start with me, spend my time working at the PIC, doing that which our mandate tasks us to do. And I don't have the opportunity, of course, to be answering all the questions that I know you're going to be asking me. And today is that day where we feedback how we've been performing as an organization. And then, of course, to give you an opportunity to get clarity on some of the issues that you might want to get clarity on from the PIC. As I've indicated, I am speaking representing the PIC, more specifically the board of the PIC. I would like to apologize on behalf of our chairperson, who would have really loved to be here, but he's traveling. Dr. David Masonga, our chairperson, he has recorded a message that we will be sharing with you instead, just to indicate how keen he wants to be joining in these proceedings today. And also to welcome you on behalf of our board members, some of whom are not physically here, but are joining virtually. So again, it's not just the CEO welcoming to the PIC, and then of course my colleagues that are with me here, together with the rest of the staff of the PIC. Welcome to this briefing. As you would know, on our behalf, our integrated annual report together with our financial statements were released by Parliament, who is the custodian of those, last Friday. So some of you have had prior sight of those documents, those publications, so I'm sure that it's given you an opportunity to prepare some questions for clarity. But for those that haven't, they were released, they are publicly available. I've seen some comments about us not being transparent, so we'll talk about that. But I think just to say that it has been released and it is already publicly available. But we are sharing this, not saying that you don't have them, but sharing them so that you have an opportunity to engage with us in matters that you may want to just get clarity on. Just broadly, I think the good news that we'd like to share is that from an audit perspective, our external auditors, the Auditor General, has again given us an unqualified audit. There are a number of findings. Once there are findings that by definition material, we can quibble about to what extent they are material. So there are a number of findings that they actually highlighted. They are in the report. The first one was non-prevention of potential fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And the focus is non-prevention. It is not that it is there, because we were able as management to identify the challenges that that gave rise to those potential fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and to address them and to recoup any money that would have been considered to be fruitless and wasteful expenditure. So the finding is not about the failure to identify and to recoup, but more the fact that we're not able to prevent, which is a much higher requirement from the PFMA side. So that's one. And then the other finding, of course, is an issue around non-compliance, where we did not follow process completely in a specific instance. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. I think that's just indicated of the areas that we still need to improve. However, what you might want to actually look at when you look at that particular aspect is that it was a finding that came out of a very special audit process where the transactions that we entered into the previous year were all audited, and only this one finding was actually identified from that auditing of the full population of the transactions that we'd entered into. And then another finding, of course, speaks to some material challenges in terms of how we're contracting from a performance perspective with our shareholder, and that we could actually be much smarter in how we actually contract in terms of performance. So that's broadly, but I know that the CFO or the acting CFO will touch on that. So I apologize on behalf of the chair. I also need to apologize on behalf of our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Batanda Damoi, who's currently on leave, and in her stead, Mr. Brian Mavuka is acting as the Chief Financial Officer. Brian, of course, is not new to the hot seat. He had been in that seat for quite a number of years until such time that we had appointed the permanent Chief Financial Officer. So Brian is acting today, but he had until we had the Chief Financial Officer acting in the role, so he's quite capable to assist us in presenting the reports to you today. The good news, now getting on to the presentation, and the details you will find in the report, is that from a client investment portfolio perspective, the PIC has been able to continue to manage the assets of its clients as mandated. Strange sound there. Just to highlight that about 87.97, you could say 88% of the assets that we manage are the assets of the GEPF, and we were able to grow the assets of the GEPF about 70 billion in the previous year to about 2.4 trillion. That growth comes over and above the fact that the GEPF had withdrawn over 117 billion to pay benefits. So there had been this almost capital injection to our beneficiaries or the beneficiaries of our key client, the GEPF, pensioners, widows, orphans, and of course people who might have actually left work for whatever reason. Actually, were part of the participants in that 170 billion. Most of it actually probably ended up in the economy and assisted quite significantly in the economy of the country. And then, of course, another major client being the UIF, a growth of 5.55%. The assets grew to over 149.55 billion, by 16 billion. Now, this one is quite significant because you will remember that the UIF came to the rescue, if I can put it that way, during the COVID period when the TABS scheme was established to assist employers and employers to also assist employees during times when, due to COVID, they actually couldn't support their businesses due to the fact that we had first total lockdown and various stages of lockdown, which made it very difficult for businesses to actually continue. And just to remind you, over 64 billion rand was used from the UIF to support the TABS program, which is almost close to just almost half of the total assets of the UIF if you look at where they currently are. So we've grown the assets of the UIF despite the fact that there have been these significant outflows to support the test. And of course, there is money that's ongoing, flowing out of the UIF to support the beneficiaries who lose their jobs, not through their own doing, if they are dismissed or they are retrenched. They have this opportunity to claim from the UIF for a period while they actually transitioning to new job opportunities, hopefully. And then, of course, we have the compensation funds. There are two of them, the commissioners and the pension. The pension being the pension for the people that work for the commissioners, and the commissioners being the one for the benefits. And the commissioners is for people who suffer injuries on duty or get work-related diseases for which they can claim the benefit. And again, this is a very significant benefit that goes to workers in the country. This one grew by 4.62 billion to 59, that's the commissioners. And then, of course, the fund itself grew by 9.8% to 51 billion. And then the smaller clients grew by 2.5 billion. Now, the CIO will speak around, you might say, well, those growths they were speaking about, 2.5 to 0.2, 5.5, you might ask the question that he will kind of give you perspective and context around why, though they might seem like they're small percentages of growth, they're still quite significant in the broader scheme of things. So currently we're sitting at total AUM, and I know I'm saying currently, but this is 6 months after currently. This is the 31st of March. If you really want currently, I checked, I'm hoping that when I go back to my desk, I will have to get an update. But as of yesterday, the total assets of the clients of the PIC were sitting at 3 trillion. From beginning on the 26th of September, we started hitting the 2 trillion mark. It has been fluctuating. Of course, I'm hanging it tight that the 3 trillion will persist until the 31st of March, so we can report in essence a growth in total assets to 3 trillion by then. But for now, we only speak about what the assets were as of the 31st of March, which was 2.7 trillion. But of course, the government of national unity, some of the global dynamics around the easing of interest rates, the stimulus in China, probably contributing to the current run in the growth of the assets to about 3 trillion. But we'll take it, thank you very much. We will not refuse it. So, just to give you a highlight of where the clients are, I think you will see in detail, currently 2.3 trillion being the GPF, the UIF about 133 billion, the compensation fund 54 billion, compensation commissioners 46, the associated institutions pension fund sitting at 17 billion, and the balance of the clients being 43 billion. Now, in the balance, of course, are very, very significant institutions. For instance, the Guardians Fund, the fund that looks after the orphans of the country who need to be looked after, sits in that 43 billion there. The next slide just shows you the growth in assets over the last 10 years, except for, of course, the challenging time during COVID. I think the PIC has continued to grow the assets under management. And of course, more important is the significant recovery after the challenges that we faced, and I think all other asset managers globally faced due to COVID. The good news, and I know that the CFO will also dwell on this a bit, is that the board is currently proposing to the shareholder to pay a dividend for the current year of 141 million. I will let I won't steal the thunder from the CFO, because I think this is a significant achievement, but he will actually speak to it in context. Now, just to remember, that this was the case in the last 2 years, that we've actually been able to pay a dividend, but I think CFO will touch on that. The other big news that we want to share is the continued growth in our support for the industry largely, but more important for black asset managers in the industry. And what you will see is that we have consistently been growing our allocation to black managers. When you go back to about 2009, only 70% of the assets that we allocated to external asset managers were allocated to black managers. That has grown now to 66% of the total allocation now is actually allocated to black managers. And in actual numbers, the next slide, it shows you that that number sits currently at 624 billion. When this program started, we started out with 64 billion being outsourced to external managers, and then, of course, that smaller portion being allocated to black managers. But as we speak, a total of 624 billion has actually now been allocated to external managers, and a significant part of that to black asset managers. I'm going to pause now. I think I did indicate that the chair would have loved to be with us, but he did record a message, and I hope that technology isn't going to not play with us, along with us, that we will be able to project and play the message of the chair. Adrian, as I head over to you.
The chair's message will play as soon as we're online with the technology. As a CFO, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, E. I think what's important to highlight, which continues to be something we are proud of, is to be one of the entities that continue to pay dividends into the fiscus. In the past 2 financial years, we've paid approximately 240 million to the shareholder, being the national government, with the shareholder representative being National Treasury. In the current year, the board has declared and approved a dividend of 145 million. The dividend will then be tabled at the annual general meeting for the approval of the shareholder in line with the PIC Act. I think the other thing to emphasize is PIC's business model. So PIC's business model is to be self-sufficient and not to require any funding from the fiscus. And that has been the case since the commencement of the entity, and based on the financial result, it will continue being the case. We derive most of our revenue from assets under management. So as asset management under management grow, with the work that the CIO and his team are doing, we are then able to grow our revenue. I think that the one thing to highlight that the CEO touched on is that we were able to grow assets under management by approximately 3%. In that growth, there were withdrawals of 117 billion, and the team still managed to grow AUM by 95 billion, which could have gone very bad had the team not done what they were supposed to do. So we were able to then, year on year, so compared to financial year 23-24 and 23-24 and 22-23, we were able to grow our revenue by 3%, which is in line with 3.6 growth in assets under management. We believe that as an asset manager, the 2 key areas where we need to be spending money on is on our systems. We've continued to invest in our systems to ensure those are best in breed, and we've also continued to invest in our people. In the space that we operate in, it's very important that we have highly skilled individuals who will continue to deliver on our client benchmarks and client performance. So the driver of our expenses growing by 6% was mostly due to the reinvestments that we've done on both our people as well as our systems. With the funds that we generate after paying our expenses, we then reinvest that into our balance sheet. We have an internal portfolio that's managed by the CIO's team, which was the main driver in us growing our revenue by 22% to 231 billion in the current year. And that also goes back to the skill set that we have internally, that we don't even go outside of the PIC. We trust the people that we work with for them to be able to generate returns, and they have been able to generate those returns for Pickoff. During the same period, we were able to grow our balance sheet by 2%, and it's currently standing at 4.6 billion. And we were then able to decrease our liabilities by 8%. We continue to be a self-sustainable entity, and we will continue to return dividends to the shareholder in the foreseeable future. We spoke briefly about the outcome of the audit, where if you look at it year on year, we still have received an unqualified opinion, but there is a regression in that there were material areas that were identified by the AG that were not there the previous year. The board has already implemented plans that management has already started working on to ensure that we close off all the material areas that were identified by the Auditor General, and we will continue striving for a clean audit for this financial year and being 31st March 2025.
Thanks, Brian. I think one of the items that I know is of interest, that I do think that's important that we share. I was speaking to colleagues who spent some time in a certain office in downtown Pretoria for quite a while there was a process that is now known as the Party Commission of Inquiry, which is really an inquiry of the PIC that the President had actually put together to look at certain issues that were of concern about the PIC at the time. Just to remind you, of course, is that the Commission finalized its report and presented to the President, who had, of course, set up the Commission. And the President, being the President, of course, was not going to be in a position to deal with those, so he delegated the implementation or the addressing of the issues that were raised in the Commission to the shareholder representative, being the Minister of Finance. So the person that the PIC has been working with in terms of addressing the findings and making sure that we implement the recommendations of the Commission has been the Minister of Finance. And we have, over the last 4.5 years, been addressing the findings and reporting regularly to the Minister of Finance. First, of course, management does the work. Initially, the board had set up an advisory panel that was led by the late Justice Orme, so rest in peace. And then, of course, when the term of that panel finished, the board continued to make sure that management implements. And the reason why the panel was important was to, number one, to ensure that the findings and recommendations are numerically implemented and addressed, and more important, also to ensure that qualitatively they are addressed. So there's one thing for you to simply tick the box to do, but have you done it to the extent that would be the expectation of the recommender of the recommendation? And I think that was the very most important aspect of the responsibilities of the panel. So the board ensured that there was an independent entity outside of the PIC that ensured that when we say we've implemented a particular recommendation, that yes, we have implemented it, and also answer the question, has it been implemented to the right quality, so to speak? And I think that was the role that the panel was playing. So as I indicate, we've been reporting, and I think on an annual basis, when we have this kind of conversation with the media, we've also given some feedback around where we are. And today, I can share that of the 308 recommendations, there were 308, there were 243 that the PIC had direct control over. So there were a number of recommendations that, of course, related to the PIC, but had to be implemented by other bodies or other entities that the PIC was working with, and those, the entities themselves can report on. But the ones that the PIC has or had control over, I can report that we're sitting right now with almost all of them. Of the 243, 242 have been, in a sense, being implemented. The one kind of caveat that I do need to indicate is that there are certain matters that we have implemented, but their life has not ended. So, for instance, the one that everybody knows in the public domain, the VBS matter. The VBS matter are the things that we needed to do because we were a founder and there was involvement from the PIC and some of its employees. We've taken the action that is required, but there is action that still needs to be required to be taken by other agencies of government. For instance, the Hawks is doing their work, the prosecutors are doing their work, and that will probably take much longer to be finalized. And there is a number of those kind of recommendations where we've done what we can do. It then, of course, may very well be that other agencies still have to do what they need to do over an extended period of time, given the nature of the recommendations that we are implementing. At this stage, being where we are currently working on a closeout report, basically saying that from where we are sitting, we believe that we've done as much as we can, and as I've indicated, there were mechanisms to ensure that, to ensure and to give assurance that first implementation had taken place, but also implementation had taken place to the appropriate kind of quality. I think we are at a stage where we believe we can now draft the closeout report, and once we've done that, of course, the closeout report, we can close the process. Ultimately, it needs to be ticked off by the owner of the report, being the minister who has been delegated by the president to ensure that we do implement. I don't know if finally it will actually end up with the president himself giving a nod or not, because we don't know. We might say we are done, but ultimately I think the owner will have to give an indication whether the owner agrees with our assertion that we done what we believe we had to do to the required quality. So that's, I think, is from where we're sitting, something that we are quite happy to report. Adrian, as I hand over to CIO.
Good morning, everyone. Quickly just take you through the performance of the investments team over the past year. But I do think I need to just paint a picture. So we are sitting today on the 2nd of October, and the mood within the country is very different. What we are reporting is obviously to the end of the 31st of March, so I need you to potentially take a step back to that period. We were in a year where we were facing potentially over 50 elections that we could record. There was high geopolitical risks that we were facing. We had a period of high inflation, which for some time it seemed a bit stubborn to come down. Interest rates were at the highest level. Consumer and business confidence was at the lowest level. That's the year that we come from. What do we do as the investments team? We always say that when others are fearful, we must be committed to invest. And part of us, what we decided was that we thought some asset classes, especially the local asset classes, were quite cheap, or they offered a lot of value. So we went overweight. We were quite bullish on local equities, quite bullish on nominal bonds. We thought we'd seen nominal bonds maybe giving us at some point 12.5%. I remember saying to the team that we must just buy as much nominal bonds that we can find. And it's essentially what we did. So while there was huge negative sentiment, we we chose to invest and invest heavily, especially in the local market and also in emerging markets. We thought we should lighten up a little bit on the developed markets, but our bias from late last year was heavily on our local asset classes. The growth took long to come, so as we stand today, over the past year you see the CEO reported a small growth in AUM, but that growth in AUM, it needs to be seen. So we had a net growth in AUM of about 100 billion. It's not small, it's a large number, but in percentage terms it's only about 3% or so, 3.6%. So this year we had the all-share index return 1.5%. So really a meager return from our local equities. We had the all-bond index only returned 4%. We also had, I think, the only place we needed to be last year was potentially listed properties, which went up about 20%. But that 20%, if you distill it, it all came in December and January of the past year. And we obviously had quite a bull market in developed markets, especially the S&P 500 or the US. So if you think of our book, so our book is split largely between 50% is local equities and the rest is nominal bonds, it's cash, it's inflation linkers. Unlisted only make up about 5% of our book. So the 95% of our book is in listed assets. So if you get 50% of the listed assets, only give you 1.5%. That's what we got, but we made sure that from the asset classes, other asset classes, we at least perform in line or we exceed. If you look at the team's performance over the past 3 years, we outperformed. Even though the beta was, the market returns were small, but the team provided excess returns beyond the benchmarks that the clients had provided to us. We had said earlier a key milestone was that on the 26th of September 2024, for the first time in our history, we reached 3 trillion rands. We hope next year when we sit there, we will be able to report that 3 trillion rand in our books. Currently, that's the mark to market in our books. I think maybe if we move forward, there is I think I'll skip this one, I've touched on it. So if you look, there is a slide where we provided just performance across the board. You will see some greens, some red. I think this is the next slide, this one. So basically, if you look over the past 10 years, we've outperformed for all our clients. Over the past 3 years, you can see GPF has outperformed and CP, slight underperformance on the other funds. But if you look under the 1 year, we've had a hit rate of maybe 80%, with all other clients outperforming and GPF underperforming. And that slight underperformance on GPF is largely due to the fact that we are unable to go overweight the financial sector. So the Prudential Authority has classified us as a significantly important financial institution, which means that they don't want you to hold, they don't want us holding significant equity position in financials. So every time we need to buy an old mutual or a net bank, we have to go and ask for the PA to increase that limit for us. So that created a structural underweight, obviously, for our portfolios. And we will see how financials have performed in the past year and also in the past 2 years. And we tried to catch it in some ways by going overweight properties. But properties, listed properties is a small component of the whole book. We have found a solution with the client where we will revise the benchmark for listed equity, and we think going forward we should continue to do well. For the last financial year, because we measure ourselves largely on the 3-year performance, and we have now signed with to be GIPS compliant. If you look at the composite in the past year, we've outperformed. So quite happy with that, but we are concerned going forward that there might be a slight underperformance due to the structural underweight. But from a data point of view, or the whole market point of view, we can see, obviously, we've seen enormous returns post the GNU. So I think I've spoken, there were some initiatives taken by the team over the past year. On the multi-management side, we started to implement or to externalize the cash from some of the passively managed funds globally into actively managed funds globally. And most of those actively managed funds globally, we move into what we call multi-vector funds, but we also moved into emerging markets because we were quite positive on that. When you look at the unlisted side of the business, and again, we are referring to about 5% of our book, we have seen significant improvement when it comes to performance. I think some of the returns that we are seeing, I'll start with the directly held properties. We are seeing our IRR starting to catch up. We have a problem obviously on about 30% of the book, but 70% of the book on directly held is doing well. On the indirectly held, which is the largest component, those funds are doing well. That will be the likes of your Attack, Waterfall, your VNA. Those assets are performing well for us and the client, and we are quite happy. On what I think the media would know as easy buyer, we have seen IRRs that are now moving closer to cash rates, which we believe is a good start. We have started to invest and deploy. What we are seeing on the books when we do valuations, quite a significant portion of the investments that we've made in the past 2 years, we are seeing very high IRRs. I mean, we have one investment where that IRR is already north of 80%. So improvement on the easy buyer or the unlisted investment portfolio in terms of the IRR, but also in terms of the multiple of invested capital. So I think we are quite comfortable here. We've always said that we don't know everything as a PIC. There's 400 people who work here. We don't claim to know everything. We believe in partnership. Where we have skills to execute on our own, we will try to do that. Where we believe we can benefit from partnering with others, we will continue to do so as well. And hence you will see our approach in investments. We do direct, we do indirect investments. We do local, we do global, but we cut across the whole spectrum of investments. And in some cases, where we feel we need to partner with others, we will do so. You may have seen yesterday that there was an announcement, or actually 2 days ago, that we signed an MOU with International Resources Holdings, which for us, it's obviously a catalyst to potentially bring money into the country that will support our infrastructure, that will support us greening our economy, but that will also support the renewable energy and mining. So if you think of our mining has been in decline for many years. If you use technology properly, there are ways to potentially extend your life of mines. So we hope this partnership will lead to great things, not for PIC, but their clients only, but really for our economy and the country. I'm not going to talk to everything, but it's on the unlisted side, I know it has been a pain point for, I think it was potentially one of the key reasons why we had a party. And like the CEO has addressed you, we've completed a lot of transactions on that book. We are ahead of schedule as to where we want to be. And with every investment, we run a live internal audit. So hence, the material finding that was found, unfortunately, it was on a transaction that happened in 2021. and we just needed to make sure that we clean up that process going forward. So very happy with the deployment rate. On transformation, I think so in the past we used to focus on ensuring that ACI, African Colors and Indians are represented. In the past, say 18 months or so, we focused a lot more on ensuring that women are part of the economy. So a lot of what we are doing now is making sure that the companies that we have invested in, they have women representation in terms of our shareholding, they have women representation at their board, and we gave ourselves a very high target, so almost 50% for those. And in our engagements, that's what we want to see. Where we allocate capital to external fund managers, our question to them is that as a woman leading, making decisions on investment, if they are not there, what are you doing about it? And we will track you according to that. So lots of good things are happening there. We at 2.8 trillion on the listed side, 7 trillion on the listed side. Brokerage is very important. So where we trade our shares is very important. And we have now allocated, if you look in the past year, about 98% of our brokerage went to companies that have a B rating of level 1 to level 3. If you were to then make it a stricter definition of looking at black-owned entities, that number of brokerage is about 70%. We said earlier that we've allocated 66% of our domestic equity externalized capital to black-owned fund managers, and we want to keep it there. But going forward, we've also noticed that there has been an issue with Reg 28. So Reg 28 has essentially allowed has allowed pension funds to externalize nearly 45% of their capital. And what has happened is that if you were a domestic equity-only manager, you've seen your assets fly out of the country. So there's one area that we believe going forward, we would like to see some of our local fund managers managing global assets. So it's a discussion we are currently having as a board and with the client, but I think we do have some alignment. It's more about the team as to how do we assist our managers to do that. Otherwise, we will not have any global skills locally. So we have a duty to ensure that we have a financial services industry, especially the asset management part, that is thriving, that has skills and talent to make sure that they can continue to manage our assets. I think the last one is that we do contribute on average, the range, we contribute anywhere between 15% to 75% of our asset managers, black asset managers revenue pool. I think that number the CEO spoke to it, but maybe just a slight correction. It's 630 million that we contribute annually, or that we contributed annually as revenue to those black-owned firms. So I think, Chair, CEO, we do have other initiatives in terms of transformation. We have decided we are a lot more active, and I know by being active, it doesn't mean you will see us in the media making statements, but typically we engage one-on-one with a lot of boards. We had issues with SPA, which we engaged the board and the management team there. We had issues about more than a year ago, about 2 years ago with Puro, and we have seen a very positive change from that board. Multi-choice was a key topic about three or 4 weeks ago, so we continuously have engagements. What we are also doing on the unlisted side, maybe just on properties, is that there are properties that were inherited from the 1994 dispensation, and there are properties that we have held in our portfolio and are very difficult to either lease out. Maybe the node has changed. I mean, if you just consider yourself having a property maybe in the middle of Joburg City, I was going to say Hillbrook, so that it is clear, is that property 50 years ago was a prime property. Today, the load has changed. So we do have some challenges with some of our properties. So what we've decided is that we enlisted about 70 properties that we wanted to sell. Out of that 70, we have now sold about 42 to the market, and others we are either repurposing them and using them differently. On the unlisted side, excluding properties, where some of our clients used to complain is that we are too passive and we do not set value creation plans, so we don't have a plan for how we are going to extract value in businesses. So in the past 2 years, we've started to create value creation plans for all our key investments. So for any investment, we need to know what is the plan to extract value over the next 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. We also classify investments as either investments that we want to hold forever. I would say something like toll roads, those are investments you want to hold forever. But there are certain ones where you want to exit if the cycle becomes in your favor or if you hit your target returns. So those BCPs are now being concluded by the team. And we also have a team that manages, we call them a turnaround and value add team. And that team basically take businesses that are potentially in ICU, and they try to resuscitate them and take them to potentially a better one. And we've had some few successes in the past year, one of it being After Group. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, CIO and CFO. I think the way to probably, from at least where I'm sitting with my colleagues close out, is just to talk about the extent to which I think this organization has journeyed from where it had been during the Party Commission. Sometimes when you look at a report like the report that came out of the Commission, you look at it with dread, especially when you look at the numbers, as I've indicated, 308 recommendations in total. You think, where do you start to implement? The good thing for me, and I think for the PIC, has been to work through that journey of implementing the recommendations, because the recommendations was, yes, about dealing with historical matters, some of which we still have and will continue to have, because those are investments that you can't simply just switch on and switch off. You need to work through them over a period of time. And sometimes we focus on those, forgetting that we're actually moving the organization forward. But the benefit of the recommendations of the party was to, in a sense, set out a new PIC, a PIC that is going forward, a PIC that has learned from some of the errors of its past, and to institutionalize some of the recommendations to, in a sense, protect it from an overly individualistic focus. I know there are some quotas who will say, yeah, but we don't see you. We don't talk to you. I say, well, but I'm not the institution. The institution is the PIC. It's my colleagues, the people that work here. I wasn't here 5 years ago. I don't know if I'll be here 5 years from now. I definitely was not here in 1911. And hopefully in 100 years from now, the PIC will still be here, and I definitely will not be there. And the important thing is to ensure that we build the PIC that is able to continue into the future and continue in a better way in executing its mandate. And I think the benefit of having to deal with the findings and recommendations of the Party Commission has been largely to rebuild that PIC that will see taking this mandate forward.
Thank you, Mr. Sithole and the panel. We would love to take this discussion forward for a few minutes, so you're not out of the hot seat yet. If I can welcome Mr. Timodise, a well-known broadcaster. He's going to moderate a dialogue with the three of you and also with the media here, so we can have a more active engagement. He's obviously been following the proceedings. For those who can't see me, it's Adrian again. and I'm just running you through the proceedings. So we'll have a discussion now. We'll find a way to take questions that have been posted online with the technical team, despite the difficulties. I've also issued the media statement and the documents associated thereto on email. I'll continue to distribute it to our media recipients. And then you should receive 3 documents. One includes a full list of our listed and unlisted investment schedule, and that's a legal obligation on us in terms of the PIC Act. So that accompanies the media statement and the presentation, and all of those documents will also appear on our website as from now. Thank you very much, Tim. Over to you.
And thank you very much, Adrian. Also the executive and leadership team of the PIC for inviting me to be with you this morning, and my colleagues in the media, thank you very much. Quite an impressive presentation that you have given this morning, but there are still issues, obviously, in your line of work that you've got to contend with. Let me start by the comments made by you, Dr. Sithole, regarding the Party Commission's report and the recommendations that they made to you. What were the key learnings for the PIC from that? And I noticed that there's still one item still to be dealt with. So a 2-part question, the key learnings, and the second part of the question is what is still outstanding?
Of course, I need to distill the 243 recommendations. I can talk about them probably in groups or in themes. I think the first one, of course, was governance, very, very important. So the big issue, if you remember, at the time, we had this unfortunate situation where the whole board of the PIC had left, the CIO had left, the executive followed largely after that, and there was this almost rebuilding of the PIC from a governance perspective. And one of the key issues was to ensure that the organization is appropriately governed, that the board is there tasked with the duty to manage and control the organization going forward. Although this didn't really happen at the same time as the party, and the party had a slightly different recommendation, there was a bill that was also current at the time, which was then signed by the president in 2020 to become law. And what that bill did basically codified the governance structure of the PIC to ensure that the key stakeholders are represented. First, to ensure that people whose money it is that we are looking after are represented, so the clients now nominate who our board will be. And then, of course, labor, the representatives of workers, also have, in law, need to be represented on the board of the PIC. And then, of course, over and above that is that people with certain expertise via the shareholder representative being the minister are also appointed to the board. So the board of the PIC today is very, very different from the board before the party, in a sense that the board represents all the key stakeholders. The representatives of clients, largely the GSA, and the other bigger clients. There's a representative of labor, codified in law. And I think that to me is a significant change in governance. The other thing that also happened was that historically the Deputy Minister of Finance was the chair of the PIC, but actually it was not in law, it was just practice. This now has been made into law with a variation in a sense that yes, it is the Deputy Minister who can be the chair of the PIC, but it also provides for other Deputy Ministers in the economic cluster to become the chair of the PIC. That, I think, was a significant change. But coming out of the bill were other 2 really significant changes that came from that process, which were also quite big in driving the whole process of the commission. The issue was codifying in law the fact that the PIC must manage the assets of clients and the instruction of clients. That we mustn't take instructions from outside of the mandate of clients. So that is in law. So you go to law, it's very, very specific. What that means is that I can't prevent people from calling me to try to tell me how to manage the assets of the PIC. But I have a very easy defense.
Yes.
Is to say, the law says I can't listen to you, madam or sir.
Yeah.
The law says I must listen to my clients. So that was a very significant change, because although historically that was always what the PIC did, because it looked after the rest of clients, now the law is very clear. You must only act at the instruction of your clients, in a sense, get a mandate from them. So that was very, very significant. And then with that was to say, but you also need to consider with your clients the broader issues of the country. First, the legacy of where we come from, so deal with issues of transformation broadly, and also deal with issues around industrialization and making sure the economy operates in a manner that is beneficial to the rest of the country, and then to be very direct about dealing with more issues around empowering those who are historically not empowered. So I think that's important. And then I think Adrian closed his statement about this one, because I think there was a contention around issues around transparency, ensuring that in doing the work that we do, we are transparent. So I think the statement he was making is that with the annual financial statement of the report, we also have the list of all the investments that we are making also being made public. I think that's also a requirement that came with that. So that was at the governance level. And then there was issues around the management of the organization, the change in the structure. So it wasn't just changes in how the board is constituted, it was changing in the structure, especially at the executive level, where now the executive is not only constituted by the CEO, but we have now new chiefs who are responsible for very specific portfolios. A significant one being the fact that now we not only have CEO, we have Chief Investment Officer, currently Mr. Rikhotso. Is the name that I call him, so the cost sometimes comes second. So the creation of the recreation of the role of Chief Investment Officer, but also other key roles like the creation of the Chief Risk Officer. So yes, you must make investments, but you can't just make investments without being cognizant of the risks that you're taking in making those investments. So the Chief Risk Officer now plays a very important role in making sure that we, invest for returns, but we are also very cognizant of the risks that we're taking in investing. And with that, also looking at the enterprise risk, the risk of the organization as well. That I think was a key introduction. And then the introduction of the Chief Technology Officer. Again, we had people leading technology, but that now becomes a big focus when this acting CFO indicated what our cost drivers. Human brains is a big driver, and then of course technology being the other. Now we have somebody that's specifically representing that is Nemak and Mosidi, the Chief Risk Officer is Mr. August Yerde. And then the reintroduction of the role of Chief Operating Officer, again to make sure that there are other aspects of the organization that focus on making sure we achieve the objectives of the strategy in terms of how we manage the assets of the clients. And of course, there was always a Chief Financial Officer, and that I think was there. There were other entities that the one that were created, not at the executive level, but reporting to the CEO, that are very, very key. Key was to make sure that the roles of internal audit are strengthened, the roles of compliance are strengthened, because one of the challenges in the findings of the party was the fact that there were policies, but they were not followed. There were laws, but they were not followed. So making sure that we comply becomes a very key part of how we do the work that we do. And then there was an introduction of a new department office, the Office of the Ethics Office in the PIC, that looks how we conduct ourselves ethically as the people that have to execute on behalf of the PIC, but also to ensure that when we are entering into transaction, we looked at certain key ethical aspects, like for instance the issues around people who are connected, because again that was the whole contention around party to say, did we favor certain people because was a big part of how we needed to address that. So I think that was also quite important. And then at the investment level, yes, you had the appointment of Chief Investment Officer, but the board itself was then and has been doing that over time to reconstitute itself in such a way that it focuses on the key areas of delivery. So now we have a group investment committee of the board, reporting to the board. It is supported by 3 specific asset class type investment committees, one focusing on property, one focusing on listed investments, and the other focusing on the unlisted space, and ensuring that each one of those is resourced with people with appropriate skill and understanding of each one of those areas, and then of course supported by a management structure that reflects those committees. And more important, the delegation segregation of duties, maybe I should put it that way, was not only about making sure that the CEO is not serving both people's roles of CEO and CIO, but ensuring that even the CIO and all the other chiefs also have delegation to the other heads within the organization. So delegation was a very key component of the new governance structure. And then there was this, a recommendation broadly around making sure that we have appropriate policies, we have appropriate governance frameworks, we have appropriate SOPs that helps us to implement and that they are. And the reason why we focus on those that they must not be known in people's heads, they must be documented and institutionalized so that when I walk away tomorrow, they still remain. If my colleagues walk away, if CIO is not there, the way we do the things that we do are now institutionalized. They don't rely on one person. They can actually be done by whoever comes and actually continues. Of course, they can be improved and will continue to be improved in terms of how we go forward. And then lastly was to make sure that the PIC becomes, in a sense, available and accessible to everybody. People might maybe contend that statement, but the reality is that in the past there was this complaint that if you want to get support from the PIC, you need to know certain people. And what we've done is to make sure that anybody who has a proposal can submit that proposal and it will go through the same process. People will come to me and say, CEO, I want you to, I'm going to hand over a proposal to you. The same proposal will go to the same queue with everybody else. The fact that you hand it to the CEO makes no difference. There's only one queue. It will be considered by the same process and will arrive at how we proceed going forward from that perspective. I know that was long, but 308 recommendations require a 308 response.
Surely there's a lot that the organization learned, and then there was a lot of work that you had to do. Just explained here. But let me talk or ask a question about your business, that is to maximize the returns on behalf of your shareholders, right? And this question to you, Kabelo Rikhotso. You, as the organization, have commented on the green listing of the country and what the effect of that is on your foreign investments. But let's come back to the domestic, specific areas of logistics. Transnet in particular, it's been underperforming and it has challenges. But to my mind, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or I've got it all wrong, the performance of some parts of the state, municipalities for instance, not paying their dues on time to entities such as ESCOM, and that in itself affecting the revenues at ESCOM and the investments that have got to be made there, including areas of growth in the particular sectors that you might be interested in. What's your view of the performance of some of the state entities, Transnet in particular, and the municipalities in general?
Yeah, I think it's if you look at the strategy that has been set by the board of Transnet, I'd say we've seen a big improvement this year. So in 2023, 2022, I think Transnet was in a dire state, but I think the turnaround plan initiated obviously by the board. We also had, I think it's the radio, is it my radio? Okay.
Can we cut this mic and let the CEO use the mobile mic? Thank you.
Please. Thank you. Yeah, so I was saying that if you look at, we are seeing a significant improvement with where Transnet is today. So and we are quite comfortable with the strategy that has been deployed by the new board. It was potentially one of the key networks in the country that held us back. Remember, Transnet impacts how we take metals from Kimberley to the ports, how we take some raw commodities from wherever we are mining them to those who want to acquire them from us, and also especially coal. I think we had an exercise, and I think I showed this in one of the conferences, was that there was a huge opportunity cost when it came to coal. So what was transported relative to the price of coal at the time was, I think the numbers that we estimated was nearly almost 100 billion of opportunity cost. I think the current new chairperson of Transnet, who's been there now for just slightly more than a year, and his board, the strategy that they have devised, we are fully in support of it, and we are starting to see some benefits from it. On ESCOM, which was another key network, without electricity, the economy can't grow. We've had now just over 130 days of no load shedding, and if you look at it, the strategy there was to ensure that you put in a strong chairperson. That chairperson was surrounded by a strong board, and they managed to identify individuals within ESCOM, especially on distribution and generation, who can then correct the issues. And I know there is one individual there who I will not name, who's been very instrumental in us not having load shedding. For us as the PIC, we've always taken a position that we will support, obviously, ESCOM, Transnet, not at any cost, but we do think if you don't support it, you basically just shut down the whole country. So we have devised what we call an SOE, a state-owned enterprise strategy, which covers when we support and under what conditions. So and that strategy was shared with all our clients, all our board, it was approved, and we're quite happy. So I think energy and logistics is not, I think ESCOM has its potential, we can say it's turned around. Transnet still has some way to go. We will see with the initiatives to include the private sector on rail. I think that may also assist. But we have a collective of the private sector, the public sector, us who manage money, all wanted to make sure the country works. And I do think, I feel very positive about the country, and we are seeing a huge improvement. If you read last year's report, it would have been very negative on those two companies, but we believe it's turning around. Thank you.
Well, just a quick one, and colleagues, I'm coming to you. I don't know who wants to ask a question next. We'll be coming to you there. Like, my brother, you're invested in property. You mentioned it earlier, but property does not happen on its own. All right? It's impacted by what happens locally. And I'm looking at the state of affairs at the metro level. Let me confine myself to that. But because whatever goes on at those metros must, one way or another, affect your investments in property.
Yes, I think that that's correct. I mean, we've had huge struggles in some of our developments. So if you look at the metros have obviously deteriorated, and where we have buildings in those metros, we are struggling to attract tenants unless you break down the whole building, you build a new one. I think for some of our clients, we had to do that, where we identify a piece of land and we build something new. Our view was that we're going to have to fix the metros, and our approach is to go on a nodal approach. So what you do is that you don't put one building in the middle of nowhere. So you rather go for what we call a nodal approach. So if you put one building, we make sure that we have a 5 or 10 year plan to make sure that the whole place around it is cleaned up or it's improved. So, and we are seeing that. So you will see in some of our investments, we are starting to invest in what we call your smart cities, so the likes of your Awick, the likes of your Sanctuary City, and also for something like in rural, where we can support rural retail, we are trying to do that. But it's our responsibility to clean up our cities. We want Pretoria, Tshwane, and Joburg to go back to how we grew up. And currently, it's a very sad state. But we are trying our best to improve it. So you can't always run around the cities. We need to go in, identify the issues, work with partners to create nodes where people can live, work, and play in a safe space.
I think some of it is through support of entities. I think we are funders, so by and large, our way of helping is to help with funding. We're not operators. I wouldn't know where to start dealing with the metro. I don't know how to deal with the PIC. So we will support sister companies or partners like the DBSA, where we provide, where they need funding, we'll fund. And they then, of course, are much more better placed to assist metros, municipalities specifically, to deal with the challenges that they have found. And I think they're quite successful in assisting municipalities historically to achieve their objectives, and from our perspective also to achieve our objectives. We support other sister companies or brother companies like the IDC. Again, we are very close to dealing with some of these entities. So where we cannot do it, I think that the CIO made this point earlier on. We do not claim to be able to do everything. We believe that we can do things with other people that can do things better. And we always look for those opportunities where if we can't intervene, we assist those that can intervene, provided, of course, that it actually still meets your first question point. We need to generate the return for our clients and the beneficiaries.
Yes, sir. I know that you in the back there, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Benedict Linza from Business Report. It's a pleasure to be apparently moderating, and thanks to the executives for succinct explanations. The question has almost been taken out of my mouth, but I would appreciate if would the PIC give a perspective on how it can assist municipalities with their financial strategies, their role that the PIC can play, given, for instance, issues that are happening now with ESCOM in its turnaround plan is attaching bank accounts of municipalities that are not able to pay back. I take it that the municipalities' inability to pay ESCOM debt translates to poor service delivery. So the question is there a role where the PIC can play in that space? The second one is just a request for a bit more clarity on, I think Mr. Rikhotso pointed out earlier that this MOU with International Resource Holdings is to impart help with the resuscitation of the mining industry. How does the PIC envisage the mining industry to be helped with resuscitation? Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's a question that came through online from Carol Payton, News 24. The measurement of the performance of the UIF and the GPF net of inflows into the fund, or is the measurement of performance of the UIF and the GPF net of inflows into the fund? Number two, the PIC Amendment Act introduces a provision that requires a list of all listed and unlisted investments to be tabled in Parliament. Where do the public get access? I think we've answered that. It's on the website right now. Then question 3, what is the overall performance of the Aspire Fund and what is the credit loss ratio? What is the overall performance of the Aspire Fund and what is the credit loss ratio? Are there any other hands in the room from our guests here in media for questions?
Hi, Vernon Vessels from Currency. I've been asked to ask this question. So, I was just wondering if you've received the 690 million rand from AO and what value what you're doing to add value to the remaining stake that you have, and I think that's, according to your report, is what, 30.52%.
Thank you. No further questions? Thank you, CEO.
Okay. Shall I start with Eunice and then I'll hand over to the CIO? So how do we assist municipalities? As I've indicated, I think there is no, well, to say there is no, maybe not a true statement because it speaks to what is our mandate rather than what can be done. So the PIC is a fund, so all we can do is to provide funding to entities that can assist municipalities, but not to assist municipalities directly, except in one way, and this we do. So to the extent that especially the big metros require funding and they want to borrow and they are capable of repaying borrowing, we do lend to them. So if you were to look historically into the PIC's financial statement, you would find that we have funded big metros, the city of Cape Town, Ekurhuleni, I think Joburg. So to the extent that the big metros require funding and they can make a bankable proposal in terms of any lending that they require, the PIC from a funding perspective can consider to provide that funding. But ultimately, of course, it has to meet our investment requirements for us to be able to do so. And some metros have historically been able to do so, and they've been able to pay back the monies that they borrowed from us. So that's one direct way that we can provide for. Indirectly, as I've indicated, we do support what I call sister or brother companies that are better at assisting municipalities. I think the DBSA being one such entity that is much closer and much better in terms of assisting municipalities, and we do provide funding to them. But again, that funding is a commercial proposition. It's that we lend you for you to own land, but we need a return. We need both the return and the return of money, if I can put it that way. So that's largely how we assist. And then I think the point that the CIO made at a broader level is that we have made a strong case, sometimes around significant opposition, to say that we believe that there are key state-owned enterprises that need to be supported. Not at all costs. I think they need to be properly governed and properly managed, or indicate that they will be properly governed, properly managed, so we can make a good case for that. And that in those instances, to the extent that they are key to the economy broadly, but more to entities like municipalities over and above anything else, that they continue to survive. Because, and I think what you are pointing out to is that sometimes, and I think Mr. Mudisa made this point earlier on, to say that sometimes we look at the failure of these entities without understanding how that failure actually arises. Yes, it could be through internal issues, misgovernance, mismanagement, but sometimes it's external issues. For instance, are municipalities receiving their dues in terms of power and the services that they provide? Because from that they can then provide more services, they can borrow more to be able to provide even more additional services. But first and foremost means that us as citizens need to be paying our dues. If you're not paying rates and taxes, how do we expect the municipalities to be able to provide the services? If you're not paying for the electricity and the water, how do we expect the municipalities to be paying? Same thing. How do we expect municipalities to be paying ESCOM if they're not getting paid themselves? In some instances, it may well be that they get paid, but they don't pay on to ESCOM. So ESCOM needs to be, in a sense, supported itself to be able to survive the periods when it does not get paid. So the point that he made, we then made conscious decisions around supporting those state-owned enterprises that we believe are very, very crucial, fundamental to the economy at the broader, larger scale. I'm going to hand over to, I think there was the question, yeah, you can answer most of the other questions, I think, CIO.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Just on the MOU side with IRH, so I think the question was how do we see resuscitating some of our mining? I think the opportunity is a lot larger than that. So if you look at South African commodity assets currently, it's gold, it's PGMs, it's iron ore. Gold has become a very small factor. But if you look at just, I think let's focus on the platinum group metals. With obviously the world becoming greener, a lot of our PGMs were used as in catalytic converters, largely in diesel cars, to clean up the emissions. As the world is becoming greener and you're seeing the advent of electric vehicles, you have less demand for our PGMs. But however, we've done research and we have seen there's potentially a use of those PGMs if you move into the hydrogen economy. So that is one area where potentially if we may have been facing an industry or a sector that may potentially not have a lot of use for its minerals, we think we need to find alternative sources. So that's one area that I wanted to cover. The other one is just the use of technology. If you use technology properly, we think there are ways to extract from an ore body a lot more of what the metal you require per kilogram. And again, if you look at just our deposits as a country, what we regard as green metals, I think except the likes of manganese, we don't have any of them. So lithium, a lot of copper, cobalt, they are just sit outside our area. You find them in the DRC, in Zim, and in other areas. So going forward, we are faced with a situation where the metals or the commodities that are required for the new world do not come from our market anymore. So for us, we want to start diversifying, obviously, our interest. Where we can, we want to ensure that within our clients' portfolios on mining, we also get a hold of those assets. These types of partnership will assist in diversifying our commodity asset base and hopefully our clients' returns over time. There was a question relating to is the performance net of inflows. I think I just want to explain. So how we present, you will see that we talk about annual growth. That annual growth in AUM, it takes into account cash contributions from clients, it takes into account all withdrawals from clients, and finally it takes into account the market performance. So when we say overall 3%, just understand that 3%, there was nearly over 120 billion that was withdrawn. So that's how we present it. If we were to show it in terms of what we call total shareholder returns, it might be slightly different. But just for understanding AUM growth, it's contribution from the clients, it's withdrawals from the clients, and finally it's just market growth for their portfolios. I think the list of listed and unlisted assets has been published. What is the overall performance on, I think they said, is it Dubai?
Yeah, it's understood.
All right. So the current multiple of invested capital that we are seeing for one of our largest clients, it's about 1.4x, which means that for every 1 rand that we've invested, we have made 40% more since inception. That IRR, I think if I remember the number, was just under 7% over the past 3 years, but obviously over a longer period it will be different. So I think I'll just have to confirm the full number, but for 3 years it's just under about 7%, which is our performance target as a team. And then just in terms of the credit loss ratio, so if you look at, we normally talk about a credit loss ratio of about, I think it's 30% on our book. So if you think of about 5% unlisted, it's about 1.5% that's giving us a lot of issues. So 1.5% of our whole book, it's where we have some issues. But I think, Brian, you can cover it if I missed it. Just on AO, have we received the cash? Yes, we have. We received the cash actually a long time ago. Must have been April last year, so that's it. I think, like any other investment that we have on our book, we want to make sure that we can add value and it grows. So we will not treat it any different to how we treat other investments. Thank you.
Maybe in terms of the performance of the portfolio, in the integrated report, under the first section, there is a section where we talk about performance. So 3A of the integrated report then shows that on the listed side there is outperformance, so there's alpha generated. And then 3B and 3C then speaks about the performance of the unlisted portfolio being EC buyer as well as properties. So there are positive returns on EC buyer, with the detraction coming from the old portfolio on the property side that the CIO earlier mentioned about in terms of the challenges that they are having. The credit loss ratio is around 30%, but if there's more information that's required, then we can then provide.
I think there's a microphone needed. Just give it to you.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused then because I was just looking here in the annual report and it says one of the objectives. It's on page 38, 39. I don't know if I'm looking in the wrong place. Sorry, I've just been looking and it says meet client benchmarks portfolio returns unlisted investments excluding properties on the period for 30 months, unlisted investments excluding properties measured by GEPF hurdle rate, right?
Yeah.
And then it says internal rates of return is the hurdle rate, and then it says not achieved, 6.107%. So is that the hurdle rate for the GEPF that you didn't achieve there?
Yes.
So that's specifically for the GEPF,
Yeah,
but overall for all your clients you achieved the hurdle
I think
rate.
it's largely, I think that number is indicative of
The whole portfolio.
Yeah.
So that's the full portfolio.
That's the full portfolio, but the important part is I'll just make sure that measurement is over the last 3 years.
This one.
Yes.
There's another question from Tim Cohen on AO. In terms of the agreement, so that's the settlement agreement, the PIC has a put option for a further 5% on the shares. Have you exercised the put? At the time of the agreement with AO, the share price was $4.50 per share. The share price is now around 50 cents. At the time, you described the deal as a good commercial decision. Do you still think that is correct? And the last question is whether FT interest on the amount, the settlement amount was paid over. But I think you responded it was paid quite quickly after the settlement, so the last question is dealt with. And then we can close questions from the floor and the audience. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's always going to be a very contentious question. The reality is that the PIC invested close to 4.3 billion, right, if my memory serves me well, in AO, and to somehow come across as if we're saying that the 619 million that was finally settled is a representation of the 4.3 billion. I think it would not be an accurate representation. And I think it shouldn't come across as if we are confused about that gap between 4.3 billion and the 619 that was ultimately settled. But here is how you must look at the transaction. You have to look at the transaction from the time it was entered into and at the time of settlement, and you need to then track what the values had been from when we first entered into the transaction at the time of settlement. And then you need to then assess, at that point in time, did the settlement make sense? Was there sufficient value at that point in time that reflects whether this settlement was a good settlement commercially for clients, yes or no? And I think if you look at it that way, you can't but conclude that it was, because you can go back and look and say how much cash was available in IO at the time of settlement, and how much of that cash were we able to settle with, vis-a-vis, of course, the fact that we had invested a much larger sum 10 years, almost 10 years earlier, and the challenges that have happened to erode that value over that period of time. So we are not in any way saying, when we say this was a good commercial settlement, we're saying we came anywhere close to the 4.3 billion that was invested, not by a long shot. And anybody who can do arithmetic can tell you that. So it doesn't require you to be a genius. So that I think is important to state very clearly and categorically. But you need to look at it at the time of settling and say what value was derived, and I think we can categorically say we derived sufficient value at that point in time. The challenges of IO, of course, continue, and as the CIO has indicated, our intention to treat it like any other investment, to try and extract as much value that we can extract. It won't be bespoke focus on IO. It's going to be the same focus that we provide to any other investment that we made to extract value on behalf of our clients. Yes, I think IO is a specific transaction with its own history, and one cannot ignore that, but it will also not be appropriate to single it out and try to think that it needs to be treated any differently from the other ones. We're going to continue to seek to extract value out of IO like we will do any other transaction that we invest in.
Thanks very much.
Moderator.
Appreciate it. And thanks again to my colleagues who posed the questions. You're going to get an opportunity for one-on-one interviews. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you. For everyone who joined us online, thank you, Tim, and thank you for those of you who attended here. Lunch is served on the far side of the